Hey guys, Mr. Kowalik here. Today we're going to look at blood basics. I'm going to go through the slides. You guys can go ahead and fill in the notes that I shared with you on Google Classroom. So we're going to start talking about just what blood is and how the typing works and the different types of blood and where it comes from and things like that. And then we're going to play some games with how we can identify people based on their blood type. So let's get started. So what makes up our blood? Blood is a couple different things. First is the red blood cells. They're the most abundant cell in the blood. They're produced in the bone marrow and contain proteins called hemoglobin that carry oxygen to our cells. We also have white blood cells. They're part of the immune system that destroy infections called pathogens. We also have the stuff in between, which is plasma. It's the yellowish liquid portion of the blood that contains electrolytes, nutrients, and vitamins, hormones, clotting factors, and proteins such as antibodies that help fight infections. We also have platelets. Platelets are what cause blood to clot, carried in the plasma. When they clot, it's a process called coagulation that seals the wound that helps prevent the loss of further blood. Some facts about blood. The average adult has about 5 liters of blood inside their body, which makes up about 7 to 8% of their body weight. Blood is actually a living tissue, and it carries oxygen and nutrients to all parts of the body. It carries carbon dioxide and other waste products back to the lungs, kidneys, and liver for disposal. It also fights against infections and helps to heal wounds so that we can stay healthy. There's an estimate that there's about 1 billion red blood cells in 2 or 3 drops of blood. For every 600 red blood cells, there's only about 40 platelets and 1 white blood cell. So we have far fewer platelets and white cells than we do red. The different types of blood are determined by our parents. It's a genetic inheritance from your parents. You're born with a specific type of blood. The inherited genes come from your father and your mother. The genes determine your blood type by causing proteins called agglutinogens to exist on the surface of the red blood cell. There are 3 types: A, B, and O, and each of those is carried on the alleles. Since we have 2 genes, one from mom, one from dad, we have a possible of 6 combinations of blood types. Up here in the top right corner, you can see the blood types that exist. So if you get an A from your mom and an A from your dad, you're considered type A. If you get an A from your mom and an O from your dad, they still consider that type A. B for mom, B for dad, type B. B for mom, O from dad, still type B. If you get 2 O's, mom and dad each give you an O, that's type O. And if mom gives you an A, dad gives you a B, that's type AB. Here are the percentages of the amounts of blood types that are out there. And we can see that there are far more people with type O blood, about 46%. Just about half of the people out there have O blood. Type A blood is a little less, but it's about 40%. We can see that pure type B blood is pretty rare, but AB is the most rare at 3.9%. So what does it matter? Well, there's 2 reasons. First is identification. We'll get into that in a little bit. But for more medical terms, we need to know what type of blood you have in case you need to get blood from somebody else, called a blood transfusion. If you lost a lot of blood due to an accident. There are blood banks, and there are places that we can take blood and put it into you and help save your life. So it really depends on what kind of blood type you have. The good thing is, once you know that, there are certain blood types that you can take. The universal donor is blood type O, which means they can give their blood to anybody, and anybody can take blood type O. The universal donor can give blood to any of the blood types. The universal recipient can take blood from any of the blood types. But if you're a blood type A, you can only get blood from A and O. If you're B, you can only get blood from B and O. If you're AB, you can get blood from A, B, or O. Any blood is fine. So as we've been going, you've probably noticed that there's little pluses and minuses after each of the symbols for the blood types. That's because years ago, there were some studies done on rhesus monkeys. They were studying rhesus monkeys because they have a very similar anatomy to humans. And they discovered that there was a protein on the blood of the rhesus monkey. And we found similar proteins on the blood of humans. The blood protein on the blood either gave it a positive or a negative trait. And that was important to find out because that helped with compatibility. So we have both a positive and negative Rh factor for each blood type. That helps with transfusions and things. So a couple terms we're going to talk about. Blood samples can be analyzed to determine blood type and DNA, which can be used to match possible suspects. Another way to use blood as evidence is in the droplets. It can be used to look for clues as to the location of crimes, maybe the movement of a victim, or the type of weapon that might have been used. And finally, blood can be used for evidence in the way of blood spatter, which is something we'll talk about later on. We'll do a lab with that. It can be used to determine the patterns that give investigators clues as to how a crime might have happened. The way blood strikes a surface can leave different marks and be used for identification of maybe which way a weapon was used or how a person was moved. So when the blood is found at a crime scene and it's used for identification purposes, the first thing they do, the CSI agent would do, is to the laboratories, is to check for species. And as you can see, each of these blood types have a subtle difference to them. They don't all look exactly the same. And that's important for understanding if there's dog blood at a crime scene. That might not be helpful for finding a murderer. But if we found human blood, that might be. So go through your notes, make sure you have all your notes filled out, and stay tuned for the next part. Thanks.